Oh yeah, that's right. I fished with Eric Rusnak for a bit.
Oh, cool.
Aloha Lures, and
Yeah.
he actually caught a grander the season I was fishing there with him. But I wasn't fishing with him obviously when he caught that
Yeah.
grander. But he was the first guy I ever saw to use like either urethane or epoxy resin, so he could make his lures extremely consistently. So I mean, no polishing or anything, so he could get a really consistent product. So that's when I started looking at making them out of that kind of material, and that changed everything. Big learning curve to transition into making lures from polyester into either epoxy or urethane, which we do today. But yeah, you can get a way more consistent lure coming out with the with those techniques now, with the new materials. So yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's sort of how I got into that. That's my journey into lure making.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the different materials. I really want to jump into that at some point here, really kind of talk about that too, because that's been a big advancement. And some people they may not be familiar with the changes over time and what that means, and how the consistency's changed and all that. But beyond that, I guess is there like a few of your lure heads that really you feel like brought your like where your staples, and then kind of brought the attention to you in the earlier years and kind of continued on or whatever? Is there a couple that you're just like kind of a guarantee, that like Marlin Magic has the Ruckus, and Garrick has
It
his Smash
depends.
Bait.
Like I'm from New Zealand, man, so like it really depends like where you look at where the lures were placed. But on a worldwide thing, like if I had to pick one lure, it would be a Violator. That definitely helped me get on the map. But I mean, like a Hercules, I've caught a lot of big fish on that. And like if you wanted to go on like granders that have been caught on the lures, I mean, there's been a few, but the Violator would stand out by a long way. And then I think Mongrel Dogs caught one, Grimmel's caught one, Ballistics caught one, BTK's caught one. Yeah, so I mean, those handful of lures are probably the most known. But I mean, we make so many lures for so many different fisheries that each fishery we'd probably talk to, they would have a different lure. Like in New Zealand, the lures that we started with, I had a lure called an Argonaut. That was our staple lure that probably made my brand in New Zealand. But it's not really that well known in other countries, And then in time now in New Zealand, that lure has changed. That would be known for now would be known for a Trojan, So a lot of different fisheries that we make lures for, and that's the beauty. I've been very lucky to meet a lot of good captains and good people around the place, and then also like now we have a setup in North Carolina with Bobby Schlegel, a good friend of mine. So I mean, the lures that they love out of North Carolina are different to what they do in other places for us. So I mean, the Violator's massive there as well. I mean, I keep going back to that, but that's a big lure. But we have a bunch of new ones that have come out as well that have been crazy good over that side of the world. So yeah, a long-winded answer to your question, but
no,
there's just so many lures. There's lures for certain situations, and I always sort of like pride myself on making lures for different, like we're a lure making company. We make lures or for fishermen, and that's why we have so many different varieties from something like different species, different weather conditions, different boat types even, So so just try to cover the bases for everyone, and that's why I say it's hard to say what the best lure is, because you are you're trying to make stuff a tool for every style of fishing and fisherman,
Yeah. And I mean, it's like you said. I mean, everywhere is a little different. certain lures excel in certain places and some, some don't. And, there's stuff in Kona that just wouldn't run in most places, and
For sure.
then
For
there's
sure.
stuff that runs great in the rough, or places that fish in, guys that fish in the rough that most people in Kona would never run. So
you did right.
Yeah. So there's, they're definitely conditional.
But I mean, lures have changed. I personally feel that lures have changed a bit, like since I first started making lures. Like when I first went to Kona, the angle face lures, there was very little keel weighting. You were rigging your lures with hook rigs to make the lure swim right, like so double hook rigs and stuff like that. Very different to what the lures are today, which are keel weighted, designed to be run with single hook rigs, like a lot more consistent lures than what we had before. And that's like just going back to that that urethane ish, like material. The lures now, I feel are a lot more user friendly and sort of more consistent in the way they run as well, and what hook rigs we can use. Because the hook rig is massive. I mean, as you know, you talk about it all the time. Hook rig and leader is huge on how your lures are going to run,
Yeah, it's huge. When people switched over from using those big, heavy double hooks and stuff like that, totally changed how those lures runs. I mean, you look at a Joey Super Plunger.
Oh yeah,
that lure runs completely different with a single hook in it. The new school way than if you double hook it with a one of those big things in it. So
totally.
Yeah.
But I mean, then you get into like it gets complicated here. Like, okay, so you use a single hook rig. Are you going for hookup rate or safety or whatever it is? Use a double hook rig, get the lure running better. Is the fish going to eat it more aggressively? Like it's a bit of an art,
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a lot more involved than maybe some people realize. That it's not just grabbing a lure and throwing something in it and throwing it out there.
Very much so.
Yeah, there's a difference between pulling lures and pulling lures correctly. Yeah.
There's a big difference. There's a huge difference,
Yeah. And it's funny. I put up a lot of like the videos on different, pulling lures and different things. And there's always a few people that are like, what are you talking about? There's no skill. You're just pulling lures. What do you, like what?
There's a lot of skill.
There's a lot. It's but that's the difference, and I think that there's guys that they're fisheries, they don't really pull lures, or if they do, it's really as a teaser basically, and they might put just a mold craft wide range or something out there or something like that, and they're pulling mainly baits and things like that, and just different style, but
I mean, there's the biggest problem, like, is everybody talks about, you want to catch every marlin that comes up behind your boat, so if that's with a lure, if it's with a bait, there's all different styles of doing it. But I mean, with lure fishing, it gets right down to how you drive the boat, where you put your belly in the line, how you manage your drag, and like, in all honesty, I always ask this question to anyone. I'm like, oh, you caught a marlin? They're like, yeah. I'm like, why did you catch it? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, because it was hooked, right? And they're like, normally 9 times out of 10, they're like, right, yeah. I was like, okay, so let's forget about that one. Let's try to catch the one that's not hooked. That's where you're going to get your extra numbers up, is trying to catch that marlin on a lure around the bill. And that's where the skill comes in.
Oh yeah.
And that was always my go-to thing. I was very lucky. I got to fish with the first season I did in the Azores, there was a boat there called the Chakra, which is now run by Olaf. But back in the day, it was run by captain called Ian Carter. And he had a crewman called Steve Hall. And actually, he's fishing with me this season in the Azores, so I'm excited about that. They all fished 80 pound. And I mean, they're catching these big fish fast. And I'm like, how the heck are you catching these big fish so fast? They're like, we're not putting any drag on. And I'm just like, what? Well, how are you? And we're all fishing 130 and stuff. And this is 20 years ago, or like 15 years ago. And anyway, I got lucky enough to fish with them. And they showed me this technique. And man, once I learned about drag management and everything like that, and belly and management of that, my fishing on lures went like drastically up, because we could now catch that fish that was not hooked. So that was pretty cool to learn that. And then what really changed was I got to go fish with them in North Carolina too, and went white marlin fishing, which I'd never seen before. And it was all dredge fishing and dink fishing and stuff, but very relatable to what we had here in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So the fishing here in New Zealand is predominantly striped marlin fishing. It's by guys in little trailer boats, 6-meter boats, and it's a very fickle fishery. And stripies can be extremely hard to catch, and no bait fishing in New Zealand. Very, very little bait fishing. If there's any bait fishing, it's live bait fishing. So that move, that got me thinking, like, we could fish a bunch of little lures with light trace, same as a dink fishing, and some really sharp little hooks, and obviously put some dredges and teasers in the mix, and basically dink fish with hooks, with light gauge hooks. So I was lucky enough that I developed the hook with a hook company, BKK, yeah, we made these light gauge hooks, and in New Zealand, it's been massive. It's been probably the basis of us like developing our brand in New Zealand. A lot of people are using them now. So what the light gauge hook is, really light, like thin fly fishing hook, but very strong if you can manage the drag correctly. But it's increased your hookup rate. So if the hook's light, it's going to go in easier. But you've got the reality of it is not as strong. So with learning to be able to manage the drag and not have the weight on the fish like we're talking about there, like lure fishing on heavy tackle, and using the drag change to manage the fish, we started using these little hooks, and it's been a phenomenon down here. And it's sort of just starting to catch on, like Costa Rica and stuff like that. If you want to release blue marlin on lures, like a lot of guys are using it, starting to use it now. So I think that's a big thing that we learned. Was once I learned that you could catch these fish with very little drag, and just using drag change, we could start to scale down our gear. And I think there's going to be some advancements in that kind of side of the fishing in general with hooks and stuff once the materials get better and better. Because obviously the thinner the hook, the better it penetrates, but it's not strong. It's not strong enough, So, So that's on the lure side, man. That changed my fishing big time. Is meeting people like that and just seeing a different way of fishing instead of just jamming the drag at third of strike and winding the fish in,
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. I think that there's a lot to managing the drag and dealing with it at different times in the fight. And yeah, I mean, there's certain times you have to do, you have to hit them, but then, on the really big ones, but there's a lot of times you end up screwing yourself over by doing it too much. So, yeah, that's a very, very good, valid point that you're making there. Those hooks, those light gauge hooks, I'm just curious for myself. Is that something, have you tried that at all here in Kona? Like if you hooked a rope, can you pull on it pretty hard?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I did it because when I had my little boat there with Troy and Karma and that, I was fishing with them. I'm like, I'm going to fish light gauge the whole time. I think the biggest fish I caught was like 600.
And pulled pretty good.
I got it. Yeah, no problem. It's like everything. The hook is not so I will not make any denial that they do break, right? But I mean, you got to put in perspective what you're using, right? But what we found is in a slow pull, the hook is extremely strong. So if you can get on the leader, man, I've broken 400-pound leader on them, no worries. Like as strong, as hard as I can pull, I cannot break the hook. But the other thing is I'm using 2 hooks. So the reason I'm using 2 hooks, if I get both hooks in that fish, it is even stronger, So yeah, I've caught a bunch of fish in Kona, and I mean, it was a perfect testing ground because I'm like, if I hook a big one and it goes down, I'm going to have to do something.
Yeah. That's what I'm curious. Yeah.
And like I've got customers here in New Zealand, very agricultural fishing, and they fish 130 with those hooks. And I've got photos of guys like just loaded up with like 60 pounds of drag on, and they're catching like, 350 kilo blue marlin on them down here.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, they're definitely very strong. They're very strong in the right situation, but you've also got to be realistic what they are. But if you want to hook more fish, they're definitely going to hook you more fish for sure. But
yeah, so your hookup rate was way up using those.
Way up. Actually,
Really?
I think I was just actually talking to a couple of guys in North Carolina there. And I think the top couple of boats in the Hatteras Marlin Club have all been on the light gauge catching like 5 or 6 blues. Actually, I think the record out of North Carolina 7 blues in a day, I think, and that was all on light gauge fishing. So yeah, definitely increases your hookup rate, but you also got to be like, well, if you hook a big one, you hook a big one. That's it, and you just have to deal with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be fishing the World Cup with the light gauge hooks, mate.
Yeah.
Like they're a tool. They're all a tool for everything's a tool that we're going to use, like, so yeah, like a lot of people can give it a bad rap, but I'm like, well, it's a tool for a situation, and that's why I get into the lure fishing. I'm like, well, there's actually a lot more to it than just drag and snag, man.
Yeah.
There's lots of good tools out there that we can provide to do better,
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I'm gonna have to try a couple of the light gauge ones.
Yeah, well, we pitch the lure with 2 light gauge hooks in it, so
that's what I was kind of thinking is on small ones or medium size, whatever, up to 600 or 7 or something.
Well,
you pitch a Tingham with double light in it.
That's exactly right. I mean, and then all these boats that are going to the Wanganella banks here in New Zealand, majority of that fishing is light gauge fishing, and they're big fish. They're like average fish. They're 120 kilos, 130 kilos, and they're catching a lot of fish with a boat that doesn't move at all, and there's 6 or 7 guys like fishing with the drags locked up. Like it's crazy how they fish them and how much they can actually take. But saying that, you've got to understand how the drag works. If you don't understand the drag, it'll let you down. Speed is the enemy. Speed is the absolute enemy. You get you say you get one of those rats that typical Kona rat that comes in there's like 150 pounds and goes ape, and you've got truckloads of drag on it from the start. It's going to fail.
Yeah.
But once it slows down, and it's going deep, and you're only using the drag when you need it, like that's the whole thing as well. Like you're only using enough drag to gain line. Why do you need any more drag?
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that people don't get is that, like, why do you need to be up at 20 30 pounds of drag straight away when you can gain line at 10?
Yeah.
I've always been that mindset, and that came from like good captains that I fished with in Kona, man. Like I never knew about getting broken off on the first run until I went there, and then I go with like some very, very good captains, and you hook a fish and it's all over in 30 seconds. And now I understand why, because they are so fast. You gotta have that drag backed off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, and I don't think some people don't factor that in, that they can make a move real quick and get you in a lot of trouble really fast.
Yeah, real fast.
Yeah. So yeah, that's some great information. I think just about everyone I've talked with about blue marlin fishing on these webinars that we've done, we've all been sort of in the same agreement on the drags, and kind of there's a time and place, and it's more than snag and drag, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, natural thing when you learn to fish is we need to stop that fish, like, so the natural thing is once it's ripping is like push the drag up is the most people's natural thing. And I'm like, It's the actual polar opposite, you know, of what you need to do. All you're trying to do is stay connected and pray that you're still on once it all settles down, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all that's going to happen, that fish is going to get tired, and now you're getting on top of it, and now now you can start using a bit of drag while he's trying to catch his breath, and
Yeah,
now
well,
you got to.
yeah, you're going to have to get that line out, a belly out as well, you know? Like
Yep.
that belly is like, I don't think people understand much about line drag either, you know? Like that can be a real issue, especially on a heavy tackle, you know? Like the amount of drag that say your Amelon puts in there with a half a spool out is a lot of drag.
Yeah, it always cracks me up when people will say, the fish will run way out, do a huge run, and then turn and start jumping at you and come off. And someone will blame the captain or something and be like, well, that fish jumped at us and he didn't run the boat and this. I said, man, do you know how much drag was at that fish's face from the freaking, just the lure pulling through the water, not to mention the big line of 530 extra hard.
Yeah.
You're not, that is just like, I try not to listen to those comments.
When you hear that. I always say belly's your friend lure fishing in my opinion. Like slack line is my friend. Like
in the beginning, for sure.
Yeah, and the reason I'm saying that is because, like, say the fish is only hooked around the bill.
Yep.
That hook has gotta come all the way over the head of the fish, down the body, and out off the tail to come off, because your lure's pulling from behind. As soon as you do the one where it's jumping towards the boat and just hammer it and you're up on the drag, if that fish isn't hooked, there's only one way for it to go. Straight off the nose, so there's a lot of misinformation as far as keeping line tight and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, if you could do one thing, lure fishing, for example, is just keep in your head that you need to keep the lure behind the fish if it was a really general basic thing, because that'll help you catch more fish. Obviously a lot more to it than that, but if you just kept that in mind of like, okay, I'm going to keep the lure behind the fish, you'll catch more fish on lures. Simple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I always think that too. It's like you said, the belly's your friend. And, even up until the end of the fight, I like having a little bit of belly in it. And when it, how many times do we fight these things? And right at the end, when you finally lose that belly and all of a sudden you come tight and.
Oh, yeah. And that's like when I'm like driving the boat, for example, fighting a fish, and it's either big boat or like if I'm back and I've got the angler out the side if I possibly can.
Yeah.
I'm very really trying to back with it straight down the line. I've tried to get the angler out the side, and it's the same with the trailer boat. I'm fishing that fish naturally out the side because I'm not backing on that fish. I'm driving forward on it. But in the big boat, I'll do exactly the same. Put the angler out the side, and it's all to do with like maintaining that belly,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's some great information that I think that it's kind of one of those things I think you just have to learn over time, but people hearing it probably, helps them kind of think about it. But until you really start to visualize what's actually going on there, and, there's a lot more going on than just you're fighting this fish straight from the line and it's going straight to the face. There's a lot going on there.
Oh, for sure, man. And the thing is, if it's hooked, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
right.
It doesn't matter, man. Like, so, but
if
you want to catch that, if you want your percentages lure fishing to go up, there's only one way, is catch the ones that aren't hooked.
Yep.
It's improve your hookup rate. And that's how you do it, is catching the ones that aren't hooked.
Yeah. Yep. I also think there's probably something to how your lures are running, and what you got out there, and the bite that you kind of get out of that fish. Yeah. For how that, and how that affects your hookup rate. I think that does have something to do with it.
Yeah, there's definitely there's a lot of lures that I'll get a lot of bites on, but the hookup rate can be poor at times.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely running a spread to hook them.
Yeah. Well, that was one thing I wanted to go over with you was some of the high hookup lures that you really like, that your go-to high hookup lures. I've been kind of messing around with some different types of ideas just myself with running lures where I'm having like super aggressive teasers, those
Yeah.
like flaps I have, and they're all over the place, and they raise the shit out of them.
Yeah.
And then having behind them something really easy for them to eat, because I've
Yeah.
already raised fish, right? So I don't
Mhm.
need to, she's in the spread, and then a couple bullets out the back. And I just feel like, I don't know, I may throw that out the window down the road, but it's something I've been kind of messing around with. But it's just like having that, and stuff out there that's aggressive without a hook in it to raise that fish, and having something that I can, if I'm not pitching a bait to it, something that's an easy meal that you have a high hookup rate. And so I was curious, out of your line of lures, is there a few that you really like, or just certain head shapes you really like in terms of the high hookup ratio? And
Yeah, for sure. And I think size of the lure makes a big difference too. So
yeah,
like if I had to pick one, a Trojan is massive, like for awesome hookup rate for us. Runs in any weather, gets deep, and it gets deep. It's like a cup face, short-headed cup face lure. That thing there, I had very good hookup rate. And I have a bigger version of that called a Islander, and that's had a really good hookup rate as well. I just think easy to eat. But the other thing is too, if you watch the way fish attack certain styles of lure, like a really splashy lure, like aggressive surface pushing lure is normally a very fast like attack on it. Like it's just a whole gone. Yeah. So like I'm trying to run a spread where I'm trying to manipulate the most aggressive bite I can, and exactly like, especially fishing in New Zealand, I'm fishing exactly how you speak about, like 2 really aggressive teasers, normally a squid chain with a lure behind each one, and then just 4 very small lures, and all I'm doing is fishing for hookup rate. And I feel super confident that I've got my big teasers in there. I'm not worried about having, like, I always used to think it's sort of a fisherman's, like, how would you say, insecurities coming out, that if you don't have that big stuff in your spread, and say you're running 4 small lures, you're not going to see anywhere near as many fish. So you solve that by chucking in your teasers, and then all you're using your lures for is hookup rate. And I learnt that as well in Azores last season. A lot more fish there than previous years. And in the end, just the smaller lures or smaller hooks is what we were catching them on and hooking them on. Before that, I'll be straight up, I had a terrible hookup rate at the start of the season. Just big stuff with big hooks, and I just wasn't hooking them. So dropped down to like an 8 and a 9.0, and I wish I'd done that at the start,
Yeah.
So like, as far as shapes go on hookup rate, I really like the cup face and the flat face lures. Like, we make a Trojan, Islander, a lure called a tracker, which is like a flat face, very consistent lures. Yeah. And then a Viper, which is what Stuart caught his winning fish on in the World Cup. So those are the kind of style of lures that I like to use in various sizes for my hookup rate, for sure.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, here's the thing too, I've been noticing with the blue marlin, when we started really kind of teasing them here and trying to switch to them, is once you get them up on a teaser, they'll eat most things. So if you have some good teasers without hooks in them, I mean, obviously, especially in Kona, there is a chance that you're going to have that big whoosh and she'll never see her again. But you never know. I mean, usually that you never know if you would have hooked that fish anyways. And I mean, with those big lures that are super aggressive, moving all over the place, doing everything with bigger hooks, like, your hookup rate's terrible on them most of the time. So I'd rather risk that and get them in the spread and get them to eat something where it's like, okay, I feel good about that bite.
Okay, it's like anything too. I feel if you're fishing in a fishery where you're fishing for big fish, your hookup rate is normally better. I mean, the target's bigger.
That is true.
And then you fish in a fishery like Kona, which is similar to New Zealand, obviously different, like stripies and blues, but we still get a good blue here in New Zealand, big fish, it's very difficult to fish for every fish. So
Yeah.
if you're fishing in a fishery where they're all big, well, that makes it a lot easier. If you're fishing in a fishery where they're all small, well, you're targeting all small. But if you're fishing in a fishery where you're catching various sizes, that's a very difficult fishery to fish. And I mean, that's why, like, fishing how you talk with, like, say, a couple of lures in the longs and teasers and short is a great way to fish, because then you can pick what you're going to present to your, to the size of the fish as well. Like, I have a very good friend of mine, very good fisherman, fishes out of Exmouth in Western Australia, a guy called Eddie Lawler on Peak Sport Fishing. Amazing fishery over there, but it's a very diverse fishery. So, you're fishing, you could have 1,000-pound blue marlin, or you could have a sailfish in the spread at any one time. So I know, like, that's how he fishes, and it's highly successful. And I know his success rate's gone up drastically since fishing that. But also, it's great to have the 2 lures out the back as your safety net,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, like, for instance, that violator, that lure raises a lot of fish. And I haven't put a hook in ours. I just pull it as a teaser, and it does raise a lot. And but I used to pull the Bart scoop face lure, similar type back, and I pulled it for years, and I would get so many bites on that thing. But my hookup rate was the worst I've ever had in fishing. I mean, it was horrendous. No matter what I did, hook down, hook up, whatever I did, it just, the way they fed on that lure was the hookup rate. But it would, some days, it was the only thing. And there'd be terrible fishing, and you'd raise one on it, or, you'd get a bite on it. But that, to me, is a lure that would be a great teaser, and I that moving around, that, like, drastic kind of darting or whatever. I think it like kind of provokes that attack. But I guess there's certain lures that some people would like to run as, run more as a teaser,
Oh, for sure, man. Like, it's such a mental game. The fishing, it's like what you like out there, and if that's what you need to put out there to make yourself fish better, and that's what you like looking at, and you're getting bites on it, and you're happy with that, well, that's how you just gotta, fishing is like, you gotta do what is good for your head, because I mean, this game will drive you crazy, man, So it's like, I think the switching, like, I'll be straight up with you. I've done a bit of it. I'm certainly no expert, but I mean, I've caught plenty of marlin doing it. But it's a great way to fish if you're targeting the different sizes of fish, for sure, man. But I know, like, personally, if I was fishing for big fish, I'm fishing lures, man. That's my all lures. Very basic spread, probably no teasers, just 4 big lures. And then if I'm fishing in a place where there's like what you're talking about, like with the different size fish, I'm very open to the switching, on a day-to-day fishing basis,
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I can pitch lures too. That's the other thing, is guys don't talk about much, is like pitching lures, like, especially in rough places, pitching lures is very, very effective. Like, if you've got places where it's rough and you can't, like, present the bait, and the angler can't stand up that well, getting them to slide a lure back there with a little lure with a couple of hooks in it can be extremely effective as well. I don't have to, as a captain, have to slow the boat down. Don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. And it makes it very easy for the person to learn pitching too,
Yeah.
So
That's
a
smart.
highly effective way of doing it,
Yeah, a lot of guys have done really well off that.
Yeah, for sure.
And you kind of get that, if you get the right bites done right, you'll get that kind of going away.
Well, that's what you want, right?
Fish. Yeah, and that's the one you want.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing you gotta be like okay with is what you just said there. If you get that big crash bite and it smokes your teaser, and that's it, and you go, oh geez, I wish I had a hook in it. But then you got the other time where it smokes the lure and it falls off. You go like, geez, I wish I would have I could have switched that one. You know, it's such a
Which that one we would have caught it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know. Would have you?
But you
Would
gotta
have you
be
caught it?
exactly. You don't know. You know, so it's just you just got to do what you're gonna do, and you're gonna miss fish regardless. Doesn't matter. You could have a dredge out there. You could come up in the dredge and check it out for a long time and swim away.
Look, mate, I hate missing fish. Like, that's the truth.
Yeah.
Like, I want to catch every single fish that comes behind my boat. I don't, but
no,
I want to catch every single one, man. You know.
Yeah.
So I think as well, like, technology is probably changing things a bit too. And I don't know if I want to go down this rabbit hole, you know, with a thing called a sonar, but like that changes everything again. You know, like this conversation would probably be a different conversation about lures in that respect, you know. And that, but look, that's, you love it or hate it. It's part of, it's there, man. And it's not going to go away anytime soon. So there's a whole nother dimension to lure spreads there as well, you know.
Exactly. I think about that too in my head. Like, well, if I was fishing with a sonar, I would probably be fishing very differently.
Yeah, correct. And then, like, you know, once you learn about that, is it more about a mental thing that we're doing now? You know what I mean? Like, so
yeah, I think that's going to be a big change. I think a lot of people are going to, you know, kind of start adapting to different styles, and you'll see.
There's one interesting thing. I do come back to that. New Zealand, and I feel really lucky that we have so many different fisheries that we're involved in, that we get to learn, that just like New Zealand is a very, very fickle fishery. And everything is trailer boats. There's not very many big boats. And the average guy in New Zealand will fish 4 lures and very, very, very basic. But what happened was, boat setup is huge in New Zealand. So we get a lot of boats that come to our shop and we set them up. And if I had to pick one change that I'd ever make lure fishing to a little boat, is put in all your lures running from the riggers. I mean, you do that on a daily basis, you know, but there's something to that, right? Like when I first started, used to just fish 2 lures out of the riggers and 2 lures out off the rod tips. Very, very basic fishing. Used to see very, very few marlin. Lure fishing was very poor. And then by some chance, after fishing in Kona, I saw that everyone was running it in the corners, and I really didn't understand why. After my first season, I was still very green. But then I come back here, put all 4 lures in the riggers, and next minute, the boat sees more fish. So start doing that with a lot of customers' boats, and all of a sudden they start seeing fish. So the customer, the fisherman hasn't got miraculously better overnight. They're still driving the same lines as they were before and stuff. It's just obviously presentation's better. So there is a lot to do with like presentation. Yeah. So even like without the sonar, the presentation is massive in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, so even if you're running them over, you still got to present well. I mean, that person before that we changed his riggers was still running them over, but the fish wasn't liking what it was seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a massive part that I feel is, one, you got to run it over, but 2, you got to present well.
Yeah. And would you recommend those guys running taglines, or are the riggers too flat in a lot of the boats you set up?
No taglines in New Zealand. Like I'll be honest with you, I don't run taglines on hardly any of the boats that I fish. Like Azores, Cape Verde, no taglines. I've run a season of taglines, no different. I would run taglines if I had a big boat, though. I'll be straight up, just because of the speed in that for lure fishing. I always used to think the drop back was an issue, but I haven't noticed much difference personally.
Cool.
But like for ease of use, and the reason why, like on the little boats down here, is one, you've got to transport a whole heap of halyards if you put double taglines on, and the other thing, it reduces your spread. So everything sucks in with a tagline with with a clip, it'll pull it right out. And anybody bait fishing will understand that, you know?
Yes. Cool. That's interesting. Yeah. Do you put them in like a roller troller, or do you like rubber band them, put them up there? What do you do?
I have
Or you
Dacron loop
use Dacron loop and just to a clip.
Yeah, to a clip, man. Yeah, and then that way I'm really like, I like to scale everything. Like the Dacron loop really gives me, like, I like to control as much as I possibly can. Like, so I want to be consistent. Like, consistent is my major thing when it comes to lure fishing. I'm trying to do, like, control as many of the variables as I can. I mean, the only thing we can't really control in the lure fishing is how the fish bites. So, but everything else I want to be able to control, like how much drag I have on the bite, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how I'm fishing, man. But like, yeah, as I say, no opinion on taglines or no tagline. Like if I fished,
just what you like. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's cool. Sure. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, just in terms of just another quick question, talking about riggers and stuff. Do you have a set poundage that you like having your clip set up?
Yeah. I'm like 12 pounds.
12 pounds. Yep. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Kind of give them that enough that it doesn't pop out while the lures swim in, but you're not setting a hook on that clip.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Are you?
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I always look at it like we talk about that, but you get a broomstick, right? You chuck that thing in the water and you try to swing it. It's really difficult, right?
Yeah.
You watch a blue marlin or a marlin in general come in there and that thing smokes it. I mean, how much force did it just like put on that lure?
Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, like you say, oh, maybe we didn't set the hook on the clip. I don't know. I feel that if the thing's like absolutely blasts it, yeah, we set the hook on that thing right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's a big part of the lure fishing too, is watching what the fish does on the bite. Like I'm watching like a hawk, what that fish does on the bite, like how it reacts, like, and then watching where the fish is hooked when I get it to the boat to see like, hey, okay, how that fish reacted on the bite was because it was hooked like this, you know? So like you get a lot of fish that come in there and just smoke you and dump half a spool and come off. You're like, oh man, I just lost a grander or whatever it is. You know, I've heard that so many times. But in all honesty, 9 times out of 10, that fish is just around the bill and it's panicking and it's just smoked you.
Yeah.
Like so fast away from the boat. And then it's obviously changed direction and come off.
Yep.
You know, and then the opposite is you get that one that comes in and smokes your lure and then just sits there and turns the ocean to white water. And I'm like, I'm praying that thing stays on. We'll get through that first thing because I think that thing's pinned, like it's hurting. You know, you get it to the boat and it's like somewhere that's hurt it, you know?
Yep.
So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so that'll dictate how you fight the fish, like for me. Once it's on there, you know?
And that's something people ask a lot is, well, what do you set your drags at on the bite? And it's like, well, it's different on every bite. I mean, I have it set somewhere where it's sitting in the rod holder, but what I tell my crew to do is completely different depending on what that fish did. Whatever, however it fed or whatever it's doing. And that's one of those things that like, that's a tough one to teach people. And there's, a lot of times in our tournaments, it's all IGFA, right? So we have our anglers that charter us show up and they have to do everything, transfer the rod. And like, we'll miss a lot of fish that on a regular charter day we would catch because of them just not teasing it correctly or not getting over to the rod or, the drag management or whatever. There's certain things that will, there's a difference, and then there's certain crew that, have seen it a million times, and when they're on the boat, I don't have to say anything. Like when Chip fishes with me and the way that he hooks fish sometimes, depending on what they did. And, even like when one's chasing it, backing that drag almost to like free spool and let them eat it for a second and then see what they're doing and hitting them. And then like almost palming the drag to really hit it for a second. Like there's all little tricks and stuff that depending how that fish ate, it does make a difference with lure fishing, instead of just saying, okay, we leave it here, we do this, we do that, which works too. But I think you can increase your odds if you're reacting to what that fish does.
For sure. But there's so many, you hit the nail on the head, man. You're charter fishing. Like,
you
so
can't teach.
Yeah. And if you're fishing a tournament and you want to stick by the rules and like, you know, which you have to,
IGFA, so you got it.
We can sit here and talk all day, but talking all day is a very big difference to doing it. Like, people's interpretation of what we've spoken about will be very different as well, you know.
Of course,
it makes it very difficult. But that's why I like fishing personally. Like, I like fishing the lighter drag on the bite, because like, if my angler wants to pick up the rod and transfer it to the chair, there's no way they're doing it if they're not used to it. With 30 pounds of drag ripping off, like, they're gonna get, like, they can't, like, you know, most people physically can't do that, you know.
No.
So you know, if you got 15 pounds of drag on it, most people can pick it up and move it to the chair, you know.
Exactly.
So I mean, there's so many things that you can do with the fishing that only comes with time.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah, exactly. It's a tough one. And, you know, it's like, how are you going to teach someone in 3 hours, you know, or a few hours or something that takes 20, 30 years to try and figure out.
But that's as well. That's with you having a system in place for your style of fishing.
Got to get close enough. Yeah.
Yeah. That you can transfer to the person to learn that quickly. You know, it may not be perfect, but hey, we've got to get some system here that people can understand, you know, like, so yeah, I mean, that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. But it's, I guess that's just one of those things that over time you figure out what you like and what works for you, and everyone's got something different, you know?
Yeah. Like, charter fishing though, like, as a captain, everyone wants you to catch them a fish when they come. That's what they're paying you to do.
Yes.
So I'm sorry to say that a lot of the anglers that we get are not actually capable of catching a big fish by themselves. So you have to manage that as a captain to manipulate how they can have the best chance of catching that fish. So it can be very difficult for you to do your job too if you don't have a good angler.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You're only capable of so much as a captain if they can't turn the handle.
Yeah. And that's like, I don't want to sound bad at that, but that's the honest truth. You know, you get these people coming along, want to catch a big one. And I'm like, well, you need to listen to what I'm going to say to you.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's
you're trying to get me to be a miracle worker here, mate, but you got to actually, like, you've actually got to do something here as well and listen, you know, like, it doesn't just happen.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then sometimes you get lucky and you do everything wrong and you still catch that thing. It's like, she wanted to get caught today.
Yep. Yeah. And then, I mean, it goes the other way too. So
100%. Yeah. That's cool. I want to bring something up that we kind of touched on early in the conversation, where you're talking about the different materials being used for lure making. Mm-hmm. I think that's important because it's, you know, from the very beginning of lure making, there's been certain advancements, but if you look at, you know, kind of where Henry Chi was at, and there, you could grab a Henry Chi lure and it's not a whole different world different if you're just looking at it than what's being made to this day and age. But there's been little advancements and obviously materials, all kinds of different things, right? You know, obviously million shapes under the sun have created. But I think that, you know, first off, I guess my question would be, that, you know, your thoughts on the different materials and just kind of a rundown on that for people that aren't even familiar. Some people don't even know that there are different materials that are being used and that there's different ways now where lures don't even need to be hand sanded, and what the benefits are of that and how different that's kind of changed lure making. You know, obviously in your lures are very consistent. And so, like, you know, explaining that I think would be cool because some people have no idea. So it's a really
Okay.
cool
Yeah.
aspect.
It's made like lure manufacturer is changed so much as far as, like, as we said, the materials and that. When we first started, I mean, the first lures I ever made were made out of polyester resin. So that's the traditional resin. Like, anyone that doesn't know, is what the traditional Hawaiian lures were all made out of a polyester resin. That resin there, you could it's very user friendly to work with, but it comes out of the mold and you have to sand it. So every lure that you sand is going to be different, especially like an angled face lure where you have to do the face. You would have found that like a lot of the older lures, including mine, were all different shapes. And the other thing you had is you had a lot of shrinkage back in the day with different with the polyester resin. So it was very hard to get two lures that were very similar. So you get one that would work good and one that wouldn't. But the beauty of the polyester is it's very easy to use. It's cheap, but there's a lot of way more like finishing involved in the polyester. But you can do two-piece molds. You can do all the different colored pores and all that kind of stuff very, very easily. But the other downside of it is, apart from that, is it's not very strong. So if you drop it on the ground, you can quite often chip it or crack it. So then came along epoxy, and epoxy was it would allow you to have a finished lure come out of the mold, but you had no part lines. So to learn how to do two pores and all that kind of stuff was difficult. And then the downside of epoxy is that it chews through your molds very quickly, because you have to have a perfect mold to get a perfect finish out of the mold, because you're not polishing it now. So, and then the other thing is you have yellowing with epoxy. So then along came polyurethane, or urethane. So I should say urethane, and that solved all of those issues. But one, it's very expensive material, and two, it's difficult to use if you're not set up correctly. So, and that's the cool thing, that when we got to set up our factory in the States with Bobby, which is where all your lures for GZ come from, we got to build like my dream lure factory. So it's a pretty cool place. I'd love to do a video of that maybe when I get across there next
that'd be
time.
awesome, dude. Yeah.
And just show we have a fully climate controlled room. Like, we can make the lure super consistently, and it's all about, like, as a lure maker, is the consistency and not having failures, because failure, once you get an air bubble in the urethane, it's no good, So so there's a lot of pros and cons and stuff to all the different materials. But as far as the urethane goes, I think that's the future. And I always want to be, as a lure maker and as a fisherman, I want to be learning and evolving, and be at the front with all the new gear that we can have, the technology to make the best stuff for everyone to use, So the urethane has been a massive game changer, but it's difficult to use.
There's a lot of little factors involved in trying to cure correctly and everything, and but that's interesting for people that weren't aware of that. And that's why, you get some of these old Hawaiian lures, or there's still guys that are still doing it the older way, and one will just catch you every fish. It's just a magnet, and then you lose it, right? As good lures often will happen.
All the good ones go, Chris. All the good ones
they're all going to go eventually.
All the good ones go, man.
Yeah. So then you go, hey, I need another one of those, and you get one, and it doesn't ever get bit, and you're like, what the heck? So what's great about that newer materials is what you're buying every day is going to be the same one that you caught
Well, the advancements in not just materials, and that's the cool thing about what I was saying about that factory we have in America, is like CNC design and 3D printing and all that kind of stuff and laser technology has changed all of that stuff. So I mean, now like for us, when we make a lure, it's all made in a jig and everything like that. So it's as close each time when we do it as possible, you know?
Yeah.
So trying to,
Yeah.
you know, like when I first started, it was all handmade, and it was such a sort of, once we changed, it was a bit of a frown thing that we changed to a non-polished lure, you know, when I first started doing it. But like it just makes a way more consistent product, which is what I feel like. If I lose my lure, I can get another one straight out of the box, and I feel like I'm going to catch on it as good as I did before.
And it's just technology, you know, it's just like what we were saying with the sonar, you know, it's just love it or hate it. Like it's there. What are you not going to go with the advancements of technology because of the old way? You know, it's like, this is the advancements of time. This is the better way of doing it. This is the more, you know, this is better for fishermen. They're going to catch more fish this way. So it's just, I'm sure there is probably that still of, oh, well, you know, the hand done way
For
is
sure.
beautiful in its own way. And then there's, you know, there's both sides. So I definitely can see both sides of that. But I think
Look,
as a
man.
consumer and like as someone that's buying a lure and spending a lot of money,
well,
you don't have time to mess around and buy 5 heads and find out which one runs good.
no,
You know?
and the thing is too, like when you're buying lures, man, like from the top manufacturers around the world, you're not just buying a lure, you're buying all that knowledge, man.
Yeah.
Like I know from our side, they didn't just come up with some random shapes and go, here, we've got some lures out there. There's a story behind every lure, and they're used by, I'm very lucky that like we have a great, like in our network, a great network of top captains that give us feedback and on what they need and stuff, you know, and like if it works, you know. So that's what you're buying when you're buying like high end like brand lures. You're buying the knowledge, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's valuable, you know. All, you know, the lure makers, they've been through it. You guys know this one has worked. This one's worked. This is, you know, you get the feedback, and that's the good thing too about, you know, customers and fishermen that are buying lures is like, it's appreciated when you get back to the lure maker or whoever and say, hey, this thing caught me this, or hey, we did really good on this here, or whatever it is, and giving kind of a shout out to these guys is always,
it's huge, man. Like it's I look at that one at the Fish for Us, especially, was the one at the Big Rock, and Captain Rom, that one, that fabulous fisherman with that new lure, like the passion and that he talks about in his speech at like, it sort of gives us chills, because that's what like that's what we do it for. That's what it's all about. Like that's the hours that we've been in the factory, you know, slaving away, and then you have something like that happens, and how much it means to him, and like life changing, you know, and you're a part of that.
Yeah, that's got to be a great experience for sure. Yeah, so for people out there, definitely give some love back to the lure makers when you catch stuff on their lures. It's I know some people like to try and be secretive or whatever, but there's no secrets anymore. I mean, come on, there's no secrets anymore. But,
well, the thing is, look, I always say, if you keep it secret, I'm not going to be around.
Yeah.
I need you to tell. Like lure making is a hard business. So you keeping it a secret, well, I'm not going to be here to make any more for you, mate. You know?
Exactly. I mean, you can do the math. It's not, they're not making $1 billion off this. This isn't, you know, it's a love, it's a passion, it's a craft.
I always say, if I would have known what I was getting myself in for, I probably wouldn't have started.
Yeah.
So, but it's cool. Like I'm a sucker, man. I love it. Like it's,
man.
I live and breathe it. Like that's my life, you know, 7 days a week, 365. There's something going on in regards to lure fishing.
Yeah. That's great, man. That's great. What about, you know, we've always talked about this, and I mean, you've you obviously know how deadly these lures are, but it seems like recently I feel like people are actually starting to catch on to this and not fight the trend as bullet lures being just such a valuable lure for blue marlin and black marlin, whatever. Like for
mate, if I had to
not just
feed
tunas.
myself, that would be the one lure I'd stick out there. If I had to, like, if I was starving and I had to catch a fish, that would be the one lure I'd put out there, some style of bullet. And that was always interesting. When I first went to Kona, I'd never seen bullet like lures. It was always like that was a tuna lure, you know?
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah.
he used to run out on the stinger, run like rubbish, couldn't even see the damn thing, and we'd catch majority of our fish on it. You know, I'm like, I hate that damn bullet. You have these beautiful, big, swimming, splashy lures and short, and I'm like, son of a bitch, man, I ate that damn stinger again, you know? And like, so that are like amazing lure. I think very, like, it depends what you want out of a bullet. Like there's so much, like once you get into bullets, there's so much difference in what sort of action there is in a bullet. And obviously a bullet's evolved a truckload in the last few years with these fish heads and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
So that's another whole ball game about like how you make a fish head bullet and stuff like that. So, but I mean, what I found, and especially talking with, like, I mean, I use his name because like I really respect him, and I learned from the little bit that I fished with him, I learned a lot, is Eric from Aloha. And we'd always talk about the one that was heavy or the one that was light was the one that caught them. You know, so you'd either have a really heavy bullet or a super light bullet was like the ones that caught it. And then I've got a good mate there in Kona that drives the high flyer, Captain Simon Brown. He has a high flyer bullet, which is ridiculously heavy bullet, and just slays it on it, mate. You know?
Yeah.
And and the bullet lure is not necessarily a stinger lure or a rigger lure either. A big lure can be a short rigger lure, or even like I remember we even used to run like a big one on the corner sometimes. And yeah, they love it. But like, I mean, in New Zealand, for example, the bullet works really well at times. And then like somewhere like Cape Verde, I ran it a bunch, and I honestly, I didn't have much luck with it. Azores, I caught a bunch of fish. So yeah, I mean, the bullet lure is extremely versatile, and it works majority of the places around the world. But yeah, it's definitely, if you haven't got one in your spread, you're missing out.
Yeah. What do you think it is? I mean, we all have our theories why it's so deadly, but you know, what do you think? Do you have a theory why they just seem to pick on that thing sometimes? And you know,
I don't know if it's what they're feeding on or what. I mean, you notice it. Like, I mean, I sort of always go back and talk about Kona, about lure fishing so much, just because it's such a perfect place to run lures, man. You know? Yeah. And you can run a variety of lures there. So I mean, your main spread is like something big and splashy, like what you're talking. It's got something that's like a flathead or something like that in there as well. So you got something straight running, and then you got like a bullet style lure. Normally is your traditional spread of lure styles. And like what I saw was some days that all they wanted was that big, aggressive, like splashy lure. Some days all they wanted was the bullet. And I'm guessing it just came down to what they were feeding on the day, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, whether it's squids or little fish or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they look cool. You know, you look at one underwater.
In all honesty, man, like I've never spoken to a marlin, so I don't know what the hell's going on half the time. You know?
Yeah. I think we probably overthink it 90% of the time.
Well, it's a good thing I was always told by one of my old captains. It's like, this is a simple thing we make complicated to realize it's simple.
That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've got to go through the complicated side to understand why you need to keep it simple.
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% right. And it goes down to even where you were just talking about setting up systems and having kind of something set you know, come and having systems set up or how you like to do things. And it takes a lot of the guesswork and a lot, it takes a bit, you know, makes it a little more consistency for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how I came about that was my first season in Cape Verde. I got there and I didn't really know what I was getting myself in for. And I mean, I had a crew that couldn't speak English and had never seen a marlin. And I don't want to be like, my boss is telling me, hey man, you're never going to be the top boat in the fleet, but you're going to catch a few. And I'm like, well, I mean, you know what it's like hanging out in the fleet with a captain and you're the shitty boat every day. I'm like, I don't want to be that. I want to have a good chance of being one of the top boats, you know, for my customers as well. And like, I just go, well, how am I going to attack this? And I just came up with like, how do we make this super simple and come up with a system? So, I mean, I made it so easy, mate. I had 4 lures. I had 2 corners on the same wave and 2 riggers on the same wave. So the boys couldn't like, only had 50% chance of mixing up which rod went where. So if they got the 2 corners wrong, they're both on the same wave. It didn't matter. And then I just had numbers on a hook with a lure on each one. And that lure goes on number 1, that lure goes, and that's how I did it. And man, once I got that sorted, they all understood, and we did really, really well, you know. It's got to be able to compete with the fleet. So it was pretty cool to learn that. And I feel quite blessed that I got that opportunity to learn like that, because it's definitely given me a good foundation to carry on with.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice, you know, I think for anybody out there. Yeah, that's pretty cool. What do you think, you know, in your eyes, like, do you see something being, you know, like the future direction of lure making? Like, do you have any thoughts on like some big changes or technology that's probably going to change some of it, or, you know, thoughts in what might change in that lure making industry?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think hooks is the big part. That's my opinion. Lures, yeah, there's always going to be advances in lures, but there's only so many shapes and skirted lures, I guess, that we can make, you know. But I think hooks is the big thing. With new materials and stuff like that, I think that's the next big thing in lure making. Well, sorry, I shouldn't lure, but in lure fishing, because the better the materials get. And I mean, you know, there's already stuff out there now. There's some pretty innovative stuff out there that guys are using that is a big change up from what we've had in the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, like just strength of material, I think is going to be a massive thing in the future.
Okay. Yeah. Anything that you can let us know about that is in the works with you? Any new things coming out? Or
oh man, I'm a lure maker, eh? So there's always something new in the head. Okay. You know. But we have one new one coming out, like is a TKO. That's the fish that they won the Big Rock with this year, the Fabulous Fisherman. That's been a prototype. And that's the cool thing about like dealing with all the captains all around the place. They're like, hey man, we need something that's going to do this, or it's something that's going to do that. Can you make that we try? So there's a bunch of lures that we've made for people that we've tried. Some have been successful, some haven't been. So yeah, you're always evolving with new product, but that one especially is one that's just, that'll come out in the next wee while. But yeah, everything doesn't just get chucked out there and said, hey, we've got a new product. It takes time, you know. Yeah, you got to test it, man, you know. So just that's new, and there'll be a few other new things coming out too, you know.
No, that's cool. One more kind of topic to bring up, then we'll kind of go and answer some of these questions. We got a list of questions here to kind of go through, but if you travel a lot to fish, is there some staples that you throw in your lure bag out of your range that you're just like, okay, I'm bringing these wherever I go, in terms of blue marlin fishing? I'm just saying, in terms of marlin fishing for the most part.
Yep, for sure. Violator, Hercules, BTK, ballistic's probably my favorite lure personally. Mongrel Dog, Trojan. Yes, that's probably
those are the ones.
Those are my sort of go-to. And then, I mean, depending on, like, if that was like my go-to, but depending on like weather conditions and calm and stuff like that, I'd probably chuck a couple of other lures in there. It'd be like a DLB Bullet. I've caught a lot of fish on that thing. But yeah, I mean, I've gone to the Azores. I have a whole bag of lures, like I have one whole luggage bag just of lures.
Yeah, as you would.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, if I had to pick a handful, those would probably be my go-tos.
Yep.
And then there's probably, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And I was like, probably if like I spoke to my crewman, he'd be like, man, you missed out on this one. You missed out on that one, that he loves.
Yeah.
So like I have confidence in every one that I make. It's a tool for a job, and I've caught fish on them all. So yeah, I don't have a problem. Like if somebody wants to put that one out, I'm like, yeah, man, as long as it's for the conditions that we're fishing, the sea conditions, like I'm very confident in all the gear that we make,
Yeah, that's great. And if you were pitching a lure to a fish, what would be your pitch lure?
It depends how big the fish were that we're pitching to. I would, like, if I was pitching like little fish down here, like say in New Zealand, I'd be pitching like a lure called an Outlaw or a Rambo or something like that, just little 7-inch lures. And then if I was pitching to blue marlin, I'd probably pitch the next size up, like a 9-inch lure, just so it's got a little bit more volume that doesn't get blasted out of the way when the fish like smokes it, So Trojan would be my next thing, but probably only with one skirt on it and a short skirt. So, but that depends how it's rigged. If I was rigging it with a single hook, I'd have it as long as possible.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say too, was, I mean, I know we're kind of running short on time here, and this is a can of worms to open up with you, but, sometimes I feel like my hookup rate actually for me is better on bigger lures because of how far back the hook is from the head.
Okay.
This is just for me personally. I mean, so everyone could be completely different. Like there's some guys I talk to that their best hookup rates are on tiny bullets, and I'm terrible on tiny bullets. And the ones I do catch, it's always like right up towards the top of their bill or something. So my thought is when they pinch it and they grab it, it's like they're just kind of barely pinching that head or whatever. And I feel like the hook farther back seems to be getting them better. But everybody's different. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
obviously every blue marlin bite is different.
But I mean, okay, so the theory is with that hook way in the back of the skirt is you're trying to hook them outside in, right? Sure. Or else if the fish comes up from behind, you're trying to get it as far down his throat as possible. But if you hook that fish outside in, it ain't coming off.
Yeah.
Like it's a beautiful place to hook one, is like pinned through the side there.
Awesome.
Eye of the hook, roof of the mouth. Like you're going to struggle to get that hook out, Yeah. But like, so all of the lures that like we would make in the smaller sizes have very long skirt. And it's simply for that reason, is to try to run that hook as far back as legally possible. Like I'll even, like on some of my own personal lures, if I'm like blue marlin fish, I actually even try to extend the skirt with a few strands to make that hook like super long.
Yeah.
And if you want to hook more fish lure fishing, smaller single hook as far back as possible. I personally feel that's the best way. But and then as I say, I fish with other friends and they fish exactly like you said, short skirts, hook hard against in there, and they catch the heck out of them too. I can't catch one like that.
Doesn't work for me.
Doesn't work for me either. So like this is the whole, that's how I like to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it's all in
your head, yeah.
In your head, man. But you can't not having a sharp lure in that hook regardless of what hook rig you're using.
Yeah.
You know, like if that was one consistent that you could have amongst everything. But yeah, personally, I will fish single hook as far back in the skirt as legally possible.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I don't think it matters if that hook's sticking out and they can see it. I really don't think they know what a hook is.
There's no, I mean, we used to use, when we first started, bright green leader. They don't care. You know, like we didn't know. And then we had red leader because everyone told us that disappeared.
Disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't know any different when we first, and they used to eat the heck out of it. So, like, I don't think a marlin knows. I mean, tuna fishing is a totally different ball game.
Yeah, we're talking different animals. Completely.
Yeah, like totally different. So, yeah, but I mean, you've got a bubble trail coming off it. Like, you're fishing heavy lead. I mean, you know, you're fishing heavy leaders, and that's the other thing is about lures being able to carry certain leader weights and stuff. I mean, that's a whole nother kettle of fish as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah. You put that heavy ass leader in something little, it's going to really dampen, kill the action of that lure.
Yeah. But quite often marlins still eat it.
Yeah. I've seen them eat some stupid things, man.
Yeah.
Especially if they're whipped up, if they eat the teaser or something like that. I mean,
but yeah, I think if you want to be consistent though, you can't fish like that. You have to fish with presentation.
Yeah. 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 Like, well, that's some very valuable information. And I think we'll probably dive into a bit here too with these questions. And so we got one here from Buck Duncan. He wants to know what would your spread be fishing the World Cup in Bermuda when you need a 600 to 1,000 pound blue?
What would my personal spread be?
Yeah, what would you be pulling in Bermuda World Cup day? And the fish that got weighed was, I don't know, he said 600 to 1,000. So a big one.
I'd have a violator in there for sure. Like that's caught a grander in Bermuda already. Short. Yeah, that'd be my either one of my corners, but and a ballistic could be on my other corner. I really like that lure. I've caught a lot of big fish on that.
Ballistic. I got to check that out. I've never pulled that lure. I'll have to look at it.
It's one of my personal favorites, man. Like I've caught a lot of fish on that. On that lure. Then short rigger would probably be like a tracker or something like that, which is like a flat face. And then my long rigger would be like a BTK, I think. So that would be my four lures. And if I was fishing for that big fish, 600 to 1,000 pounder, that would be all I'd have out there. I wouldn't have any shotgun or any stinger or anything like that. That I want to have as little stuff in the water as possible to have a big fish on like that because it eats. I'm going back through the spreader after that fish because your management of a big fish like that is crucial at the start. Yeah,
that's very true. The more line they get out on you, the more chance they have of winning that whole thing. So.
Man, like that's the whole key to it is like at the start with these big fish everyone wants to catch a big fish. So your key at the start is just damage control, staying connected to that fish and trying to manage your loss of line, like trying to keep that to a minimum, you know, because when it goes down and you got a lot of line out, you're well out of control.
Yep. It doesn't usually end too well. Yeah. Those are the situations that they just, they don't end well. So it's not a factor of like getting spooled.
No, not at all.
It's never a concern. Really, at least I have never hooked a fish big enough to be that of a concern. But it's more of like you're saying, the more line they get out in that water, the more you're screwed. You know, it's just
it's like a dog on a lead. You let that dog out on a 50-yard lead, and you let the dog out on a 5-yard lead. You've got a lot more control of the dog at 5 yards as you have over 50 yards.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And your drag is increasing a lot as that line's disappearing into the water.
I mean, I don't know if I sort of want to I mean, I probably should explain that a little bit as well. Like the drag is a double-edged sword with the reel too, because like one, you're putting belly in the line, so all your line you're getting in is drag, but then the reel's getting smaller. The spool is getting smaller, so the drag is actually naturally increasing on the reel. So you're actually putting more on as it goes down. It's like a tire iron. If you have a long tire iron at the start, it's easy. You say cut the tire iron in half and try to do the bolt. It's way harder. It's exactly the same with the reel too, you know, so you've got to naturally back it off.
Yep. And that goes against people's, you know, that are somewhat new to sport fishing, or if they've never hooked a really, really big fish, that goes against their head, or what everything's screaming in their head is try and stop this fish, try and stop this fish.
Oh, totally.
Instead of, oh, no, let's actually back the drag down at this point.
Yeah,
you know?
all we're trying to do, like, mate, we're not going to stop it. We just need to stay connected, because if we try to stop it, we're just going to break it. That's it.
Yep.
It's very simple.
Or pull the hook. Yeah.
Yeah, or whatever. Something's going to give.
Something's going to give. Yeah.
So yeah, man, like if I was fishing for that fish in Bermuda, that's what I'd be fishing a spread like that.
Cool. Yeah, that spread you just mentioned is like a spread that I recommend to most people. That similar setup. Yeah. Very, very similar.
It just covers all your bases of actions as well, you know?
Yeah. Creates a pretty good team. Every lure is kind of working off its either.
It's lure spreads, man. It's not lures, in my opinion, you know? Like it's lure spreads. You're running a spread for a certain reason. I'm not just running. I mean, the amount of times that I know now is like, you get a customer that's like, oh, this is my best lure. I'm like, okay, well, let's make a spread around that. And all of a sudden, that's not his best lure anymore. Like the spreads, everything's getting bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny to think that maybe too, sometimes one of your best lure may not even be the one that's getting bit all the time, because it may be raising that fish, but the one right behind it or next to it is an easier meal, and he darts over and eats that. That's something people don't think. So it's interesting how it all works together.
Mate, it all works together. All the lures work as, I mean, I'm all about it. They work as a team, and that's why you have a lure in certain places, you know?
Yeah. 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 It's like you said earlier, they're tools, you know, and it's a set of tools, and there's certain ones that will work for this certain situation. And, you know, it's like anything, you know, you need a screwdriver for this, you need a wrench for this, you need this for this. So it's all figuring that out, and then knowing, oh, okay, that style ahead is what I would want for this situation and in this position and on this rigger angle and in this sea condition.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about the lure fishing, I am a real stickler for having the lure stay in the water. Like, they love eating the one that skips, but the hookup rate I found is terrible on it.
Yeah.
So a great teaser lure is that one that sort of skips a little bit, because one, they can't eat it that well, and two, I can get it away from the fish, you know, but maybe not the best lure for fishing with hooks sometimes.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting you say that, because I do notice that they will pile on those ones that are jumping out a bit. But yeah, like you said, the hookup rate is terrible. And I've done a bit of underwater video of like when I was messing around creating my teasers and doing stuff. And when those lures skip out of the water, they completely disappear. Even if it's for like, you don't even think it completely skipped, it like skittered out. It's like, it's gone from view for a second or two. So if that fish is tracking it, and then all of a sudden that thing's out, you're going to get a weird bite, you know, and probably a really aggressive bite, like you said. So probably good for teasers, but it's just going to be like a blind, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, man, like that's the whole thing is there's your hookup rate lures and there's your raising lures too, you know?
Yeah.
They'll have different features in your spread. But I mean, I'm a sucker, mate. I love that splashy lure though. Because normally the bite is a big bite, but yeah, I might not hook the damn thing, you know?
Yeah. It's nice to be watching that thing all day.
Oh,
it's a good thing. It's a good feeling when you get it running right.
And quite often that's what you'll get a big fish on too.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they'll hit it, or they'll pile on it first, you know, at least, you know. Very cool. So Enzo, he's given a big shout out from Brazil.
All right, on big fish place.
So, yeah, I'm gonna try and get down there and do a bit of fishing. So I'm looking forward to checking it out.
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's asking about what pound drag would you fish for 60-pound 80-millimeter suffix line?
I just fish the same drag, man, like the 12 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm fishing that pretty much. It doesn't matter if it's
No matter
130. It doesn't that's what I'm fishing. So
Yep.
yeah,
So
12
12
6
pound-
kilos. So 12 to 14 pounds, you know.
So on the bite, while it's
Mhm.
sitting in the rod holder, you got it at about 12 pounds or something.
Yeah.
And then when you push it up after he piles on, or you just kind of let him do his thing.
Let him do his thing. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. What do you think about using extra large XL lures normally used for teasers with hooks?
Oh man, I love it. Like personally, I personally love it. But if you want to have your hookup rate high, it's not the way to do it. But I know if you want to catch a big fish on a lure and the thing smoke, like, so basically what the big lure is able to hold big hooks, in my opinion. That's what they're designed for. They're just the tool again at presenting hooks to fish.
Mhm.
So I know one thing is, I mean, we used to fish like massive lures with double 12s and double 14s. Hookup rate was terrible. But if you get a big fish and you get both of those hooks in that fish, man, it slows them down. But it's a matter of like, yeah, how many, yeah, okay, I'm going to fish for a massive fish, but you still got to hook it. You're going to potentially miss all the other little fish. And then, yeah, but you get that big one on, your gear's going to hold up and you got a real good chance because it's definitely going to slow it down. So it's all pros and cons. You've got to make the choice.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you know, like I love fishing the big hooks, but I'm like, you can't, like, if you want to catch numbers and stuff like that, you can't fish like that, in my opinion.
No, I don't think so. I mean, here's something to think about too, because I used to really like pulling just as big a lures as possible and put a hook in that thing. And I caught some fish, but I also lost some. And what I started to really think about was, imagine you're going 20 knots and you throw that lure out backwards. So now it's the back of this lure is flat. It's a big surface area. And now the skirt's folded. So now it's even more bulky.
Yeah.
And and if you were to, I mean, don't do this because you're going to hook yourself. But if you were to hold that hook rig and throw that lure in backwards into the wake and let it way back, you wouldn't be able to hold on. I mean, it'd be pretty hard. It'd be pulling. So when you think about that fish running as fast as they're going through the water, and now this lure is pulling backwards through the water. It doesn't matter what drag you have at the reel. You could have, I mean, God knows how much drag at that fish's face.
Yeah, well, you always have that guy going, I got slack line. And I'm like, yeah, there's not slack line at the fish's end, mate.
No,
you know?
No, it might be there, but not there. Yeah.
So I agree with exactly what you say there.
Yeah, something to think about, at least with those big lures. And sometimes it can help you, you know, I guess if it was someone that can't reel, and you're going to have steady pressure on that fish. But I feel like you do rip a lot of hooks out of their face on that first run.
So like, I see it a lot here because a lot of guys use wind-on leaders and they're using big lures with very short, like jack trace, the lure trace to the wind-on. And they use a big lure. The lure is just not getting far enough away from the fish, and that weight of that lure is ripping those hooks out like left, right, and center. So
interesting.
Yeah, it definitely the lure weight. That's why I'm like, even if I'm using a wind-on, I want that length of that leader as long as possible to get that lure away from that fish, the weight of that lure.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, there's lots of things to take in, man.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So,
but
up to you whether you want to try it, but you never know. You might catch your biggest fish with that big lure, or take the hook out and put a medium lure behind it.
Yeah. I mean, I get it all. I mean, you hear it all the time. They're like, yeah, I fish this way and I catch all my fish there. I'm like, yeah, you do, because that's how you're fishing, mate. You know, and that's what you like. So of course it works, you know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned something about 20 knots there. I think that's one thing as well, like that is maybe a little lost sometimes, is towing a lure when you're running at like 16, 18 knots, I guess. I did that in the Azores, and I've had some pretty mean action on blue marlin on the run out.
Really? Oh, high speed
man.
trolling, you're saying?
High
okay.
speeding, yeah. I had some pretty wild action, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's definitely worth sometimes in some places having a high speed lure out there, and the high speed lure is not quite often what we think, you know. It's a flat face lure as opposed to a bullet, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
yeah,
there were a couple guys doing that here, and they were lots of tournaments.
Yeah, could quite often be a big fish too.
Yeah.
But there's I personally would only do that if I was traveling. You know, I wouldn't do that.
It's someone else's fuel bill.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's exact. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to try that, because it definitely works.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you think about how fast we're trolling, you know, 8 knots or whatever, that's pretty slow for a blue marlin. And
you're trolling it, like if you raise a fish at that, they'll paddle up behind it like we're doing 8 knots. It's like you're like, oh man, a lot of them. Like it's just like comes up behind it. I'm like, it didn't even try to crash it or anything, you know, it just comes up behind it and swimming. You're like, whew, slow the boat down, you know, and get a shot at it.
Yeah, interesting.
It's pretty cool.
That's cool. This Bobby Lee's asking about seeing some sample of the double rigging for small hooks. I don't assume you probably have that on you. Maybe that's
not on me, but if he goes to my YouTube channel, there's a heap of stuff there. Just Bonze.
Okay.
If you just Google Bonze Lures, there's a bunch of stuff of me.
So Bobby, jump on there and check his YouTube channel out. He's got stuff on there about it, and I'm sure if you can't find it on there, you probably can go on his website and get some info.
Just flick me a DM on socials, and I'll get back to you.
What advice would you give for a small boat solo fishing? And this is from the Canary Islands.
Don't have too much gear out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like in all honesty, if I was solo fishing, I'd have 2 teasers on electric reels and then just 2 lures. That would be my solo fishing. Because I only got to clear one rod, and the other one's got the fish on. And if it comes on the teaser, I just rip the teasers out, and all it's got to eat is the 2 lures that are in short there. It's like, you know, switching basically. That's how I'd fish. And I'd feel super confident that I was going to catch the heck out of them like that.
Yeah. I think keep it simple and stay safe. Probably don't use full leaders, wind-ons.
I'd use a wind-on leader with single hooks. Have like, you know, I know a little bit about this. I've got a very good friend of mine who solo fished a lot, and out of Exmouth in Western Australia. And he's very lucky to be here. He fell out of the boat trying to grab his GoPro, and the boat drove off, and he spent, I think, maybe 8 hours in the water. Yeah. They made a full 60 minutes of like documentary.
No way.
Yeah. So I always call him a ghost when
eventually someone drove past or something.
Yeah, like they found his boat. They found his boat just driving, and there was no one in it. And so they tracked back on his GPS, and yeah, man, luckily they found him after a bunch of hours. Yeah. So it's a hell of a story. I mean, it's a very short story what I said, but like it's a hell of a story what he tells.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can never be too safe. Like no fish is worth your life, man. But yeah, just the safety would be a massive one for me. Like I'd have some kind of way of the boat, like if I fell over the side, it stopped or something, you know?
Yeah, some sort of kill switch or something.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can get that electronic kill switch or something like that. But yeah, that would be my biggest worry, you know?
Yeah. That's crazy. But yeah, keep it simple and safe.
Yeah, super simple, man.
Yeah. Well, and then Galaz Clement. Good stuff, boys.
Oh, Clement.
See you soon.
Clement. He's a good man, Clement. He drives the Nola in Azores. Yeah, he's caught a bunch of big fish, man, that fella.
Cool. Cool.
That's the cool
And
thing about like going to these places. You meet all these captains, you know, and the fishing they've done and the fish they've caught, you're like, holy heck, man. Like, you know,
right.
so it's really
Yeah.
cool going to all these different locations. You get to meet some pretty special people, you know, that have had tell way better fishing stories than I could ever tell, you know.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, yeah, I got to make it over there sometime. And I hear about all these fishermen, captains over there that you just you wouldn't really know. Like you said, you wouldn't know. You know, it's
No,
not really on Instagram or Facebook or in the all the
it's
magazines or whatever. But they're there. They
starting
catch
to
them.
get a lot more popular now, you know, like with social media, and obviously there's going to be a bunch more boats there this season. It's just
Yeah,
after
yeah. It'll
the
only
half season.
continue to grow. It'll be the new hot spot for sure.
But it's
Well,
like
it's not new.
everything. It's like everything. It's the new hotspot till it's not the new hotspot. You know, like
Yeah,
it's been. Everybody said Kona was dead, and it's had the most amazing season. You know, so
yeah.
you just gotta pick your spot and go fishing, man. You know,
Exactly. That's all it is. It's fishing. It's
like
fishing.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's fishing. Like I'll fish anywhere. I just like fishing, man. You know, so
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, thank you so much, man. It's always good talking to you and
yeah,
chatting about lures. And I think, if we weren't time limited, we probably could go for another 2 hours. So it's good
yeah.
that we set some time on this, or we keep going. But I appreciate it, man. And
No worries, mate.
look forward to seeing how you do over there and all your fishing. Keep in touch with us. Let us know.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure.
When
I'm
you
looking
get back
forward
to
to it.
Kona.
I'm excited.
Are you going to try and get back here before or?
No, I
Probably
don't think I'm
not.
going to get there. Like once I get home from the Azores, is our busy time here in New Zealand and down under. So I'll probably be flat out. But I mean, I'll get to Kona any opportunity I can get. I love that place. Like I just love the
Yeah,
whole vibe. Like it's a very special place, you know. So I'll
there
go anytime, man. You know.
is. Right on, man. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it, dude. And thanks for putting in the time and making those lures and making dreams come true for people. So, anything you want to say or leave with, or
Um, I just like I guess I just appreciate like the support of all the people that have let me have a job like this and being able to make lures and that like it's sort of a dream for me, to be honest, to be able to do this job. And yeah, I feel very, very privileged that I have enough people out there that like what our team does. And yeah, so I just sort of say thank you very much to everybody for that, you know. So yeah, man, and I hope that you guys all catch that big one.
that's the plan. That's the plan. So,
Hmm.
okay. Well, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it, and we'll stay in touch here.
Okay,
Talk to you soon.
all
Okay.
right,
Take
man.
care.
Take it easy,
Have a
man.
good day.
See ya.
You
Bye.
too. See ya.